going to start out by stitching up the diamond and the square blocks because these are a really quick win and it will give you confidence if you need it to get started with the rest of the project. So we are going to need 4 of the smaller blocks. So these measure 4 inches by 4 inches finished. So 4.5 inches once they've been trimmed down. And we're also going to stitch up 4 of the 6-inch blocks. And I'm actually going to show you how to stitch one of these guys up. The process is exactly the same for the small ones. You're just not going to be fusing the applique and doing the applique stitching in the center. So just going to pop those guys off to the side for right now, and let's take a quick look at everything that we're going to need. We are going to need a piece of stabilizer and a piece of batting. Both of these guys are 8-inch square. This is going to be trimmed to 6.5 inches square, so we're going to have a little bit of extras. We're also going to have a piece of stabilizer in the hoop. Now you might be wondering, what is the purpose of this? For the rest of the quilt, everything is going to be stitched in more than one hooping, and there's going to be a piece of stabilizer behind the batting showing us where to position everything. We're going to mark lines on the stabilizer, baste it to the batting. That is going to give us a much more accurate method than just drawing lines on the batting. So whilst it's not necessarily needed for these particular blocks, in order to create the same density of quilt all over the quilt, we're going to put this extra piece of batting in. This is the center piece of the diamond in a square block. We're going to need 4 corners. We're going to need the applique shape, the center for the flower, and we actually have a little bit of batting padding the center here just to give it a little bit of extra dimension. So let's get started with some stitching. We're going to start out with a piece of stabilizer in the hoop, and we're going to load the diamond in a square 6-inch or 4-inch, if that's the one that you're going to start out with, design, and you're going to stitch a placement line onto the stabilizer. Now this is going to show us exactly where to put the batting and this extra piece of stabilizer. So I like to line everything up with the squares on my either cutting mat or ironing board. They're not coming through super clearly here, but not to worry. We're going to take the stabilizer, we're going to position the batting on the top of it, and we're going to center that over the placement line that we got on the stabilizer. Now we don't have to be to within nanomillimeters here. We are just going to center that, kind of eyeball it. If you want to measure it, then absolutely go do that. And then we are going to hold it in place with some Scotch Magic tape at the top. Make sure that everything is smoothed out, and a piece of Scotch Magic tape at the bottom. From this point on, everything is going to happen on the machine, and so let's pop over there. So we are at the machine and we're going to stitch color number 2, and this is going to give us a placement line showing where to position the center square. Now that we have that square, we can take the center piece of fabric and we're going to place it over that. It is a little bit larger. You're going to have about 1/8 of an inch on all sides. So we're going to position that. We're going to check that we've got everything actually centered. Just flip the edges back and you can see that. Now I found that the static cling of the fabric and the batting is enough to hold that in place. next up we're going to get one set of the corners, and we're going to position these. So we are going to position the bottom left corner first, and it's going to be lined up with the edge of the center, and then we're going to position the top right corner, and again we're going to line it up with the edge of the centerpiece and make sure that it is centered on there. And we want to make sure that we've got this one down first and then this one. They're going right side down, so we're stitching right sides together. Because we're going to stitch down that way, the machine is then going to come across here and stitch down this way. If you have them this way with the bottom left corner on top, chances are when the machine is scooting over there, you're going to catch on that and everything gets messy. So bottom left down first, top right down, and then we're going to simply stitch that seam. And again, static cling is going to hold everything. If you want to have a gentle hand on there, then that works as well. Now we're going to trim all of the jump threads as we go along. I like to work with my thread cutter turned off. Saves quite a bit of time, but that is purely preference. Now that we've got these two seam lines stitched, we are going to finger press that triangle away from the center. We're going to do the same down here, finger press that away from the center. If you want to use a tiny dab of Scotch tape on the corners, then you can do. I'm going to put a little tiny bit there and a little tiny bit up here. That prevents anything disastrous from happening. Now we are going to take the other two corners and we're going to position the bottom right first up against this edge here of the square, and then we're going to do the top right or the top left, and again aligning the long edge of the triangle with the edge of the center square, making sure that everything is pretty much centered, and then we're going to stitch those two seam lines. Trim the jump threads or jump thread. We're going to flip that, finger press that away from the center. If you want to use a little tiny bit of Scotch tape up in the corner to hold that down, flip that one down and hold a little bit of Scotch tape there in the corner. Now we're going to do some plain ordinary stitching. So the next color that's coming up is going to be stitching the it's going to give you a basting line around the outside, and then it is going to do the quilting in the triangular corners. Then we're going to move into the center, do the quilting on the center background. Then we're going to get an applique placement line, and we're going to fuse the applique shape in place. The placement line is going to tell us exactly where to put the shape, and we are going to just keep on stitching. So I will come back to you when we're ready to put the center of the flower in place. I have stitched up through color number 13, which is what I've stitched up in yellow here, and now it's time to put down this little piece of batting for the center. So we're just literally going to sit it in the center so that it's covering the yellow stitching, and we're going to stitch the placement line, or the trimming line actually. And if you want to tape it, you can do, or if you want to just hold it with your fingers, you can do that too. Just a super quick little stitch there. And then I'm going to use my curved embroidery scissors. I like to use the curve when trimming around shapes. It makes life a little bit easier. Let's just trim out that thread there, and you can take this to your cutting table or somewhere where it's a little bit easier, but I am going to just trim around as close to the stitching line as possible. And I have to say there are easier places to do this. So you might want to take it completely out of your embroidery machine. Okay, now that we have trimmed the excess batting away, let's clip that back on there. Now we're going to take the center fabric and we're going to position that. Now we've fussy cut the centers here, so we do want to make sure that we've got that piece of fabric centered over the batting, and I'm using the yellow shape here to give me a pretty good guideline on getting that actually in place. And I am going to use a couple of little bits of tape, one on each. Actually, let's see, that should do just fine. And now let's give this stitch up the next color, which will give me the trimming line for the center here. And now we're going to trim away the excess fabric. And again, you might find this easier to take it completely away from the machine, but we're going to get, whoops, a piece of tape came off my hand there. We are going to get as close to that stitching line as possible. I like to do little short snips. I find that is generally easier. Okay, now that we've got that excess fabric away, we're going to just remove those little bits of fluff there and stitch the satin stitch, and then it's going to do the triple inner and outer, and we are done. When all of the stitching is complete, we can take everything out of the hoop and we are going to trim this. So the little guys finish at 4.5 inches, or they get trimmed to 4.5 inches. So you're going to put the 2 1/4 inch mark on your ruler on the corners of the center there, and that will give you perfect 4.5 inch finished diamond in a square blocks. These guys we're going to trim to 6.5 inches, so we want the 3 1/4 inch on each of the corners here. So I am using a square ruler. I find that easier. We've got, now you may be right on with the 1/4 inches. I am actually a little bit outside of that square. Go figure, it's supposed to stitch it exactly the right size, but as long as you are on the 3 1/4 inch line going down that way and the 3 1/4 inch line going down that way, you will be good. And we are going to trim and trim, get rid of those pieces, rotate, and now we can align the 6 1/2 inch on both of those trim sides, and we have got our perfectly square 6 1/2 inch diamond in a square block. So you're going to make up 4 of these guys, 4 of the little ones, and that is a really quick win for your 3D quilt.